Today we are going to be going over the listing agreement that's used by the Northeast Florida MLS. This one is another exclusive right of sale listing agreement for transaction broker. Really the only difference between this one and the standard listing agreement is that transaction broker bit. It just has to do with the level of agency between you and the client. I go into it a little bit more in depth in the other video, but being a transaction broker, really the only difference between that and a single agent is that you are not acting in a fiduciary way to the client. In a sense, you're more loyal to the transaction. Hey, I'm Frank Kritzman. I'm a real estate agent in the Emerald Coast of Florida, and I like making videos, so here we are. All right, let's just get right into it. I have the listing agreement up right here. First line, broker and the seller. Okay, so broker, this is going to be between you and your brokerage. So me, I'm with EXP, so I would write in here EXP Realty. These agreements are technically not between the agent and the client. They're technically between the broker and the seller. So you do EXP Realty in here and then the seller's name and the seller line, obviously. To make sure that you have the right person, what you would do is just go to the county appraiser website for whatever property you're trying to sell, look up that address, and find the name on the deed. Scrolling down, the next section you have to fill out is the time on the agreement. For this first date, I just put whatever date you send the listing agreement over to, and the termination date, you can really put whatever in there. It really doesn't matter too much what you put for the termination date. You just want to make sure that it's something that the seller agrees on. For me, I always go 8 months forward and then do it on the first of whatever month that falls on. That way, I always know when my expiration date is going to be, and keeping it that far out makes sure that I don't have to extend if a contract falls out or something like that. Right here, you would just check if or if not this house is the seller's primary residence. Make sure they initial there. Here, pretty self-explanatory. You go street address, make sure you put what county the house is in, and the tax ID number. This is also found on the appraiser website. That legal description, again, that's going to be the appraiser website as well, and you can also find it on the deed. It's going to be either lot and block format, which looks like lot 12, block 19 of whatever subdivision, or it's going to be meets and bounds. It's going to just look like a bunch of jumbled information that is basically directions for the surveyor to walk the outer perimeter of the property. Then if it's a mobile home, you want to put the VIN right there. This personal property section, you should be familiar with this paragraph because this goes over all of the standard items that are transferred when somebody sells a house. And then if there's anything extra or something's going to be excluded out of the standard, you would put them in this section down here. Listing price, you want to get whatever listing price there that the seller agrees to list their house for. In this section B right here, the method of payment, you can do cash, conventional, VA. It doesn't really matter what you put here because it's just going to depend on how that offer comes over. You do just want to make sure that people are aware. If your seller, for example, maybe they don't want to accept VA loans, then you would make sure you want to get that marked off and put that in the MLS listing. This section right here, C, seller expenses, I would really just kind of leave that blank because, again, this is going to totally depend on how the offer comes through, just depending on what that purchase agreement looks like. So you really don't need to get too crazy detailed in this section right here. And then we're going to scroll down, talking about the possession. Buyers will give them possession at closing, or buyer will be given possession after closing, like maybe the seller wants some post-occupancy. Again, that's something that you can check either box. The thing that's going to matter is what's in that purchase agreement. This next section right here is just discussing if the seller has the house rented out to anybody or if any other section of the house is like subleased out, if they have someone renting part of the garage. Really, this is just some good CYA. This is really going to apply, again, once you put on the MLS. If there are any leases or anything like that, you want to make sure that everybody is aware of that. Section 4, this is going to apply if the house is in foreclosure or not. Chances are that you're going to be checking box 113, that this is just a normal sale where the seller, they get the proceeds from the house and the title company pays off the mortgage, and then whatever's left over will go to the seller. I have had some surprise scenarios where we go to sell a house and then getting a little bit along in the process and we find out that the house is in foreclosure, which everything ended up being fine. But again, this is just really to help you gather all of the important information so that you are telling the other agents what needs to be done to get the house sold. Scrolling down to section 5, we have this spot right here where it just gives you the authorization to use your lockbox on their house. So you want to make sure you get that box checked and get the initials. These two boxes right here, withholding verbal offers and withholding offers after you go under contract, you do want to get both of those boxes checked, and you want to withhold verbal offers and you want to withhold offers after going under contract. Reason being, both of those boxes are going to avoid emotional roller coasters for your clients. And the whole reason that we exist and that we do what we do is to make this process as low stress as possible. You don't want to hype up your seller with some crazy verbal offer that never ends up coming in on paper. So that's why we have that box right there. Scrolling down to electronic display, chances are you're going to be getting box 1 checked. This just means that we'll be able to put everything on the internet. Sometimes sellers might not want to show their address, or they might want to hide certain information, or maybe not even be on the MLS at all. Chances are you're going to check box 1 where they just want all relevant information to be listed on the internet and MLS. Scrolling down to section 6, these are all of the seller's obligations to the broker. You definitely want to read through this paragraph and be very familiar with everybody's responsibilities. Starting at line 207, you have these sections about if there's any HOAs or fees or special assessments going on. So you would just gather all of that information. The big thing that this section is doing is just helping you to check all your boxes and gather all of the relevant information needed to make sure this house gets sold. I'm going to put the HOA information right here. Section 8 is where you're going to have the commission for the transaction. This is where you're going to put the total commission for the transaction. So in this example, we're just going to do a 5% listing. There's also a section for a broker transaction fee. And this is just an extra fee that you're adding on top of the transaction. I mean, in my opinion, if a seller is paying you $10,000 to get your house sold, and that's just your side, your check, to me, you just look kind of like a jerk if you're adding an extra $400 fee on top of that. My opinion is just not a good look. So I don't charge any additional broker fee or anything like that. Okay, down here, this is where we would put the split that's just going to the buyer's agent. So for our example of a 5% total listing, we're going to do 2.5% of the purchase price. So it would be like a 50-50 split for the commission. In this section, this paragraph right here, this is where during this agreement or 12 months after the listing agreement ends, if they get it leased out, then they owe you some amount of the lease. I don't put anything for there either. I just think, in my opinion, you only get paid when it closes. But that's just me. So if you want to add something in there, that's on you. For me, it's the same thing, section 9 in damages. If something goes wrong and the seller backs out and they just don't want to sell for whatever reason, even if you find them a buyer, if it truly is that they don't want to sell because something came up, that's just life. That's showbiz, baby. You got to deal with it. So I don't charge anything like that, if they want to cancel or if something happens where they don't want to sell. Now, it's a totally different situation if somebody comes to see the house and then they cancel the listing agreement with you so that they can go to that other buyer and try to save some money. That's a totally different situation, not applying to this. Section 11, this is where the seller would put anything wrong with the house that they know about. Really, it's probably just best to do a full seller's disclosure form. And then here you could put any improvements that they've done. This is just to help you get a good gauge on the price for the house. If there's any code violations that the seller is aware of, you would put them here in that section. And if there's any litigations that the seller is, potentially could be liable for after closing or during this agreement, you would put those here. Chances are you're not going to fill out anything in these spots. If the house was built before 78, you want to check this box, and then make sure you also get a lead paint disclosure and get that pre-signed and filled out by the seller so you can have that uploaded in the MLS. If there's any additional terms or anything weird that you need to add to the agreement, you can put them right here in section 14. Or if the legal description was too long to fit in the box up at the top, you could put that in here as well. Then you just want to get everything signed by the sellers. Make sure it's signed by you, signed by the broker, dated, and returned back to the seller, and that's it. If this video is helpful for you, make sure you press like. It helps me feed this poor, disadvantaged child in front of me. And until next time, I'll catch you later.